It's time to get real. Real situations and real solutions. It's time for Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Inspiring healthy communication, building strong connections, and helping you grow in love, one conversation at a time. Right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, each Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Here's Dr. Linda Bing.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. I hope you're ready for another night of information, questions, responses, and just plain good old conversation. Whether it's your first time joining me or you've been here before, I'm glad you're here now. So get settled in and get ready for tonight's conversation. Our first topic is love addiction. If you have any questions or comments on that topic, please call the number on your screen, 412-213-8995, or you can text me at 412-218-3888. And of course, those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, just place your comment or question in the chat, and we'll make sure that we take care of you as well. So then in the second hour, we're going to shift and talk about 5 lies that ruin relationships. Now, of course, any lie has the potential of ruining relationship, but there are 5 that are very common. They're myths that people believe, and we want to dispel those myths tonight. So second hour will be concentrated on the lies. This hour, we're talking about love addictions. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with understanding what a love addiction is. A love addiction is not simply loving someone deeply. You know, many times just in casual conversation, we might talk about being addicted to love or addicted to a certain individual. But a true love addiction means that you are depending on another person to regulate your emotions, your identity, or your self-worth. It's an unhealthy and obsessive pattern of behavior where a person has this compulsive need for romantic love, constant validation, and an inability to be alone. You know, you may have come across someone like that, the person who has to go from relationship to relationship to relationship. In fact, sometimes people who have a love addiction don't let go of the bad, toxic one until they've already found the replacement. People who have a love addiction are those folks who it's not so much that they love the relationship that they're in. What they love is the idea of being in a relationship because they don't want to be alone. And their self-worth is so low, they feel like unless there's someone to constantly say and do the right things to validate them and their worth, they don't feel worthy at all. So a love addiction involves extreme highs and lows because you're bouncing off of that other person and how much they are giving or not giving to you at any point in time. It's a fear of abandonment. People who are afraid of being abandoned and afraid of being rejected are often people who, when it gets to an extreme, can develop a love addiction. And so it sometimes causes folks to stay in toxic relationships. That's basically what a love addiction is. And you might be surprised at the number of people who actually have a love addiction. You know, we talk about it in songs and those kinds of things and make it seem like it's a positive thing, but it really is an unhealthy way of being. So here are some ways to know. As soon as one relationship ends, do you find someone new to replace the void? Do you pick up the phone to call or text several times throughout the day? How do you feel when you're not in a relationship? How do you feel when the person you're in relationship with is not around? And how important is their approval about how you look, what you do, and where you go? Your answers to those questions are a clue telling you if you might be addicted to love. Now, you may have been able to say yes to one or more of those. That in and of itself is not enough to say you're addicted, but just keep listening. We want to make sure that you don't fall into that pattern. We don't want you to get involved with someone who is in that pattern. And if you know of someone, a friend or family member, you might want to intervene, even if it's simply telling them to listen to the recording of the show. So you might be wondering, can you actually become addicted to love? Or are some people just hopeless romantics? There's a difference. There's a difference. As I said, an addiction, any kind of addiction, is caused by a complex combination of changes in brain chemistry. Genetics can play a part in it, life experiences, and environmental factors. It's not a failure of willpower, but it is a chronic condition that alters how the brain registers pleasure and processes choices. A love addiction is not an official psychiatric diagnosis. So you're not likely to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and get a full-blown American Psychological Association DSM code associated with it as a true diagnosis, but it is a condition of someone's mental and emotional health. And therapists will sometimes describe it as a compulsive need for romantic connection, despite repeated emotional harm. That's where the danger really comes in, because not only do you have this deep need to be connected, but the need is so great that many people stay even when they're being harmed, either physically or emotionally. It's the chase. You know, some people are so excited by the chase that they have to have that activity, that adrenaline rush going all the time. So the addiction isn't necessarily to a person. It might be an addiction to one of many things or some combination. Things like validation, you know, someone or something to prove that you are worthy, something to make you feel like your life has meaning or purpose, and there's a reason for you being here. Many people have a void and they look for connections to fill that void. Another thing might be attention. There are some people who just crave attention, good attention, bad attention. It doesn't really matter as long as everything and everyone is focused on them. Sometimes it comes from the need for affection. There are some people who, again, much like the validation and the attention needs, someone who needs constant hand holding, hugging, kissing, those kinds of things. Sometimes people are addicted to the affection. Sometimes they're addicted to being chosen. You might recall on a show that we did, a few shows back, my guest was Oscar Frazier. He was talking about his new book, Dear Ex-Wife. And in it, now I'm not saying that Oscar had any kind of love addiction, but Oscar talked about how he had a need to be chosen. When that need gets to an extreme in some individuals, they become addicted to the need. There always has to be someone to choose them. So many times, if someone has a love addiction, once they're in the relationship and they've already been chosen, they tend to, their feelings change. You know, the brain chemistry is shifting. It's no longer giving them the rush because they've already been chosen. The relationship will end sometimes for, you know, insignificant reasons, just so they can get back out there and be chosen again. Or sometimes they don't leave that one and they end up picking up a new relationship because they're addicted to being chosen. Similarly, some people are addicted to being desired. People get addicted to the excitement. Like I said, that adrenaline rush, it's the chase. Some people have this rescue fantasy. There are some people who have a victim mentality, and they're always in need, and they're looking for the knight in shining armor to come riding along and rescue them from whatever their particular plight happens to be. So there are some people who, because of their addiction to being rescued, they definitely are looking for that, or they have that addiction to being rescued. And so they're always waiting for that person to come along on that white horse and rescue them. These are just some of the things that people tend to be addicted to. And it may look like it's a passion or deep love or something romantic, but basically they're looking for the highs that come and they never want to be alone. So think of it like this. Someone with a gambling addiction isn't addicted to the slot machines, right? They're addicted to the dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical messenger known as a neurotransmitter that allows your brain cells to communicate with each other and with the rest of your body. It's produced in several areas of the brain, and it acts as a natural reward system designed to encourage survival behaviors. So dopamine makes us know when it's time to eat. It makes us want to learn. It has impact on reproduction and a number of other things. The key effects of dopamine on humans would be that it drives motivation and the reward center to help you reach a goal. So when people are highly motivated to achieve a certain level or a certain objective they've set for themselves, dopamine is rushing through the brain. Dopamine controls some of our physical movements that help you to move in a smooth and coordinated fashion. It is something that it's one of those chemicals or neurotransmitters that sharpens your focus and what we call executive functioning, meaning it helps you plan and prioritize and maintain attention, make decisions. And it regulates functions outside the brain like blood pressure, heart rate, kidney filtration, and insulin production. So just as an aside, you can see how it's important to your overall health. But incorrect or insufficient amounts of dopamine can lead to some dangerous behaviors. And incidentally, we talked about menopause in the past. Dopamine production is affected by menopause, which is why women who are in perimenopause and postmenopause often experience health concerns in those same areas. That's why menopause isn't just about reproduction, but there are links between women who are in menopause and blood pressure, heart rate conditions, kidney filtration, and diabetes and other things, but it's all coming from that same dopamine, the same dopamine that can influence your brain in terms of that reward and survival. It's the same dopamine that influences bodily functions for women in menopause. So wanted to make sure I got that in there. But when we're thinking about this addiction, the same way that someone who is addicted to gambling is not addicted to the slot machine or the roulette wheel or the blackjack table, those aren't the things they're addicted to. People with the love addiction aren't addicted to their partner, just like people with a gambling addiction are not addicted to that gambling device or game. They're addicted to how the relationship makes them feel, just like with a gambler. Gamblers play the slots because of the rush that they get, the excitement, the anticipation of waiting to hit. And then when the hit comes, oh my gosh, they're over the top. It's the same thing. People who are addicted to love will have that same type of dopamine rush. And it's actually the feeling that they're addicted to. So I think you get it. You understand some of the chemical underpinnings as well as the way that it makes you feel. So let me give you some examples of healthy love versus love addiction. Because again, I want to make sure that we're clear, that we're able to see, do I have a love addiction? Does my partner have a love addiction? Does anyone that I know have a love addiction? So in a healthy love, you might say or feel like I enjoy you. In a love addiction, the person feels like I need you to survive. When folks get to the point where they are desperate or they're feeling like if I don't have you with me or near me, or if you leave me, I just don't know what I might do. I need you to survive. That would be an example of a love addiction. Or I choose you. That's healthy love. But if someone feels like I cannot function without you, love addiction. Healthy love says we grow together. Love addiction says I lose myself. In other words, the other person might be growing, and in order for you to feel as if you are growing along with them, you give up the people in your life, the things you like to do, because you want to focus on them as opposed to growing right alongside them. Someone in healthy love says that love feels peaceful. Love is a good thing. But someone who is addicted to love, love feels chaotic. There's always something going on. And that's, again, those highs and lows. Healthy love has boundaries. A love addiction tolerates anything. Healthy love says we build trust. And love addiction say, I chase reassurance. That's basically some of it. So ask yourself this question. Does your relationship, or say if it's you, does my relationship bring peace or constant emotional withdrawal symptoms? The relationship that you're in, when you think of it, is it a peaceful place for you or is it chaotic? Are there highs and lows? Is it a constant emotional withdrawal? Some of the things to ask yourself. So, hey, right back at you, Yolanda. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Greatly appreciate you being here. All right, let's look at some celebrities because I think, let's spice it up just a little bit and look at the lives of some other people. Sometimes it's easier to see things in someone else than it is in ourselves. And it's always makes for a spicier conversation. So, popular opinion. Now, this is not necessarily my opinion or DSEN's opinion, popular opinion. If you're looking at social media, you're reading magazines, those kinds of things. Popular opinion says that there are some celebrities who appear to have love addictions. Some of the people that pop up when you look under those kinds of things would be people like Jennifer Lopez pops up, Elizabeth Taylor, Pamela Anderson, Ben Affleck, and even America's sweetheart of sorts, Taylor Swift. So that's public perceptions. It's not a diagnosis, and it does not reflect, as I said, my opinion or anyone else affiliated with DSEN. But I wanted you to know, when you think about those people, what are some things that come to mind? We're just having a conversation, so we're going to look at each one of them in detail. But think about it. Based on things that I've said about a love addiction, do you see how possibly they might fit some of that characteristic? So let's look at J-Lo. J-Lo is frequently discussed because of the several highly public romances and marriages that she's had. So the question is Jennifer Lopez addicted to love or simply optimistic enough to keep believing? What do you think? When you think about J-Lo, she's been married 4 times. She's had a few highly publicized relationships in between those marriages. So is that enough to say that she has a love addiction? Maybe, maybe not. If you have a thought about it, 412-213-8995 is the number to call. 412-218-3888. Give me a text. All right, so let's go back to our list. I gave you a list of things that people with a love addiction might actually be addicted to. So do you think she might be seeking validation, attention, affection, being chosen, being desired, excitement, the rescue fantasy, the chase, emotional highs and lows, never feeling alone? If you think any of those things apply, then you might think she has a love addiction. And some people might say, why would she feel any of those things? I mean, she's gorgeous and she's talented and she's viewed as unlikely to need validation. But sometimes people who are in the public eye, they develop this consistent need to keep that feeling going. It's not enough for them to just sit at home and chill like the rest of us. Some of them need to constantly be in the public eye. That's why, or one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why somebody who maybe has millions and millions of dollars, who has performed for years, is getting older and doesn't need the money, but they still go back and perform again. It's the high that they get from performing. They need attention. So in a case with love addiction, do we think that maybe somebody who is as talented and as beautiful as J-Lo would need to garner attention and affection, etc.? I don't know, just something to think about. Another person that sometimes comes to mind when people think about love addictions would be Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor has been in 8 marriages, and according to reports, she's been known to say that she loved being in love. That alone does not necessarily mean a love addiction, it's just something to think about. Pamela Anderson, she's had multiple, what the media calls whirlwind marriages, and she has openly discussed a longing for love. Ben Affleck, some commentators suggest that he repeatedly seeks relationships while also struggling with personal issues. So there are some who question whether or not there's a connection. Is he seeking the relationship sort of as an antidote to the personal issues? And are the personal issues feeding into seeking those relationships? And then last one I mentioned was Taylor Swift. And of course, that kind of goes in the opposite direction. Some criticize her dating history. Others say she simply dated publicly because she's famous. The topic of some of her songs may lead someone to believe that she loves love. And then, of course, being married does not by itself negate a love addiction. It's all about the patterns and the motives that go along with that love addiction. So yes, we know that she just got married, but people with love addictions get married as well. So I'm not saying that any of the people I just mentioned have a love addiction, I just wanted to give you a little something to think about so you can see the possibility of what it looks like in someone's life. If you have a thought, a comment, a question about any of that, then by all means, give me a call, 412-213-8995, or text 412-218-3888. And of course, YouTubers, you can put something in the chat. I want to look at where love addictions come from. So we need to look at genetics and look at biology as a source. And then right before our break, which is coming up in about 10 minutes, we'll start looking at some of the environmental factors and probably wrap up some of those environmental factors after the break. So when we look at genetics and biology, genetics account for roughly 40 to 60% of a person's vulnerability to addiction. Now, that's addiction in general. So think about it. We may know or have known people who have been addicted to cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, gambling, love, shopping, any of those. Genetics accounts for roughly 40 to 60% of your vulnerability. And that's why you can have two individuals under the exact same circumstances. One might become addicted, the other one might not. Part of it depends on your genetics. And then we know that people who suffer with depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, those are folks who are at a much higher risk as they may use substances or behaviors to self-medicate. So if people are using certain substances or behaviors to self-medicate, and think about it, someone who's addicted to shopping is basically using shopping as self-medication when they are addicted, and there's no psychiatric diagnosis, but therapists do identify people based on patterns and behavior as being shopaholics. They're addicted to shopping, not just you like to shop and you can afford to shop, but people who truly are addicted to shopping. Roughly 40 to 60% of that comes from their genetics. And if they are someone who is going through depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, they are more likely to become addicted to the shopping, if that's their drug, if you will, of choice. People who are sometimes depressed or anxious, when you hear them speak, they talk about retail therapy. And again, I know I've used that term jokingly, retail therapy, because when you're feeling kind of low, sometimes you go out, shopping makes you feel better. You go out and eat. There are people addicted to food. You go out and eat. Eating might make them feel better. Those are all things that are real. We just think about those, but we rarely think about it in connection with love. So it's not unusual for people to be addicted to more than one thing. You can be addicted to a few things, particularly if you have what therapists will refer to as an addictive personality. If you have an addictive personality, chances are you might be addicted to more than one thing. In addition to that, though, if you overcome one addiction, you might replace it with another addiction, because remember, you still have the same genetics and you have this pattern of behavior where you are looking to self-medicate with things that give you pleasure and joy. And in many instances, for some people, that happens to be, an addiction to, whether it's food, shopping, gambling, whatever. So someone is addicted to alcohol, stops drinking, but they may become addicted to something else like gambling. So this whole thing about addiction, even though it may seem a little strange, a little funny when we talk about it from the standpoint of love, we do need to bear in mind that addictions are nothing to joke about. Addictions are a big deal. And there are many people who are suffering from these various addictions right now. All right, let me, a little bit of information I want to find for you. And my computer seems to be in somewhat of a loop. So let me see if I see it on my phone. While I'm looking, like I said, any questions or comments are fair game. I would love to answer whatever questions you might have concerning love addictions. Okay. Bear with me for a second. This is why most times I do try to have the printout as well as technology if there's data that I wish to share, because we run into these things sometimes. All right, we're back in business, at least from the standpoint of being able to use some of the data that is on the phone. Can't get to it on the computer, but that will not stop us. All right, so we looked at it from the genetics and the biology standpoint. I want to move to talking about it from the environmental factors standpoint, because environmental factors also play a part in whether or not someone may or may not become addicted. So what are some of those environmental factors? I'll give you the rundown of some, and then I'll go back and give you more information on each one. So one thing would be childhood trauma. Another could be peer pressure. And another one could be early use of certain substances. And in addition to that, it's not just things that happen in your childhood. Sometimes people become addicted as adults. And so there are certain things that happen in adulthood as well that might have an impact on whether or not someone becomes addicted. So let's go back to childhood trauma, and let's start there. If as a child someone experienced some sort of abuse, whether it was physical or emotional, maybe it was neglect, which is also abuse, that trauma tends to grow with them, and it alters their stress response systems. They are not able to respond to stress in the same way as someone who has not had that traumatic experience. So remember, it's the child's perspective that matters the most. There are situations where maybe the child perceives themselves as having gone through some trauma, and adults might say, well, that was not traumatic, but it's based on how the child feels, because it's the child. We're not talking about from a legal or moral standpoint. We're talking about from a biological standpoint, from the brain chemistry standpoint. If that child's body is transmitting neurotransmitters that are saying this is a traumatic situation, then it's based on what that child feels. So even if the adult doesn't believe it, it still could be abuse. And if the child experiences it, even at a very early age, it doesn't necessarily mean that at an early age they will develop some form of addiction. It may manifest much later in life. Peer pressure. This is one that I think people are more familiar with, especially when we look at addictions of different types. When teenagers or preteens, when they have a high exposure to substance use or addictive behaviors in their social circle, it increases the likelihood of developing an addiction of some kind. So if they hang out with friends, and parents know this is why we're always talking to our children about, be careful of who you hang out with and who you hang around, because if your social circle is using, you yourself may not be, but over time, it is more likely than not that it would lead to some form of substance abuse, just because we kind of emulate the behaviors of the company that we keep. So we got childhood trauma, peer pressure, and then early use. Early use means engaging in addictive behaviors while the adolescent brain is still developing, can permanently alter the wiring of that brain. So another way to put that is, someone who is a preteen or a teen, if they get involved with drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, vaping, whatever it might be, they may not, or they are more likely to become addicted to it because of the early use, as opposed to someone who maybe did not get involved with it in their teenage years. It's the difference between a 15-year-old who starts drinking versus a 50-year-old who starts drinking. The 50-year-old, their brain chemistry is already wired. So they are less likely to become addicted to the alcohol. Not impossible, but it's less likely for that 50-year-old to become addicted than it is for the 15-year-old to become addicted. And that's because of the difference in the early use. So just some things to think about with respect to addictions. And so we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'll briefly discuss some of the ways that adult experiences lead to love addictions. We'll talk about adult experiences. And of course, I'm always interested in hearing from you what your thoughts, questions, comments, experiences might be. So we're talking about love addictions, and this is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. We'll be right back.
Effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dodson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, love and hip-hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
It's like you're a drug. It's like you're a demon I can't face down. It's like I'm stuck. It's like I'm running from you all the time. And I know I let you have all the power. It's like...
Welcome back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. Tonight, in this first hour, we are talking about love addictions, and I'm giving you some information regarding the definition of it. What are some of the characteristics to look for, and how these addictions, or this particular addiction, how it originates. So if you have a comment or question, we'd love to hear from you. Now we're going to talk a little bit about where addictions come from. How do they originate? Because we know we're not born addicted, so or at least not addicted to love. So how do we develop these addictions? And I did mention that some of them happen in childhood, but there are others that happens in adulthood. And so if you're an adult who's been betrayed, if you've gone through divorce, if you've gone through some serious rejections, you are more likely to become addicted to love than someone who perhaps has not experienced a significant, stressful betrayal, divorce, or rejection. And especially when you take that into consideration with the genetics. So if you've got the genetic makeup that is, more likely to become addicted to some substance or behavior, and then you've gone through one of these traumatic adult experiences, you are more likely to develop a love addiction than someone who has a different genetic background or has experienced different environmental factors. All of these things to look out for. So as we continue talking about love addiction and the signs of love addiction, I want to, again, ask you a couple of questions. So I want you to mentally score yourself on these things. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to give yourself a score, whether you write it down, whether you keep it in mind, whatever. But here are some things that do you, okay? So do you panic when you text that special someone and they don't text back, or when they don't text you at all? Which leads me to ask, does social media make love addictions worse? That's something we can think about. When we look at social media, the things that we see posted, does that make a love addiction even worse? Because we become used to immediate responses. We're used to everything happening quick, fast, and in a hurry. So when someone does not respond quickly or within what you consider to be a reasonable time frame, does that create a problem for you? I know many times if you're watching certain movies or television shows, you'll see people who are really distraught because they're texting someone and that person's not texting back. Somebody who's addicted to love may not even give consideration to the fact that maybe they're not ignoring you. Maybe it's just that the phone isn't nearby, or they're on another call, or they're engaged in some activity that will not allow them to read or respond at that particular moment. Maybe they're driving, maybe they're in a meeting, maybe they're going through the security checkpoint at an airport. But if not getting that immediate response is something that is problematic for you, that's one of the things you want to give yourself a score on. I would say score yourself like on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 means no, that's not me at all, and 5 is yes, that's spot on. That's exactly how I behave most of the time. All right, so we did that one. Do you ignore red flags? When you see red flags in a relationship, do you make excuses for that person? Do you try to justify what they did? Do you just ignore as if it'll go away? Another one is, do you constantly need reassurance? Are you someone who has to be told and reminded about your goodness, your beauty, your kindness, or anything else? Whatever is important to you, do you need to be reassured about it? Do you confuse intensity with intimacy? Many times there are people who will have a partner that gets very emotional. Maybe they yell a lot, and maybe they're very demonstrative. They might throw things, punch the wall, do whatever the case might be. Sometimes we think that that level of intensity means this is somebody who really loves me, or they would not get so upset over this situation. Intensity doesn't mean that they love you. And just because they are intense doesn't mean that there's real intimacy in that relationship. Do you repeatedly choose emotionally unavailable people? That's a good one. Emotionally unavailable people are folks who are not in touch with their emotions. They don't express emotion. They perceive emotional things differently than you do. They're not very demonstrative when it comes to hugs and kisses and holding hands or saying I love yous. They don't necessarily consider the emotions of someone else before they say and do things. So, do you repeatedly choose emotionally unavailable people? Do you feel empty unless you're dating? If you don't have someone in your life, do you feel empty? Do you become whoever your partner wants you to be? So because they like certain styles of dress, you emulate that. Because they like someone who wears their hair a certain way, you start doing that. That's not the same as, maybe doing certain things to please your partner. What I'm talking about is when it gets to a level that you totally eliminate who you are to become someone that they want you to be. Maybe that's not the way you like to dress. Maybe that's not the way you like to do your hair. Maybe there are certain things or activities or behaviors that are not pleasing to you, but you do them. So when all of these things are culminating and to a certain extent, that might indicate a love addiction. And do you become whoever, I gave you that, whoever your partner wants you to be? Do you stay because you're afraid no one else will love you? That's one that people don't often verbalize because they're not always aware of it. But lots of times folks will stay in a relationship because they feel as if I leave, I may not find someone else to love me. If you really feel that way, then I would say that you might not really be getting what is really love in the relationship that you're in. It might be codependency. Maybe you're just really dependent on them. Maybe they have gotten into your head in such a way that makes you feel like, who else is going to want you? I'm the only one who's going to want you, so why would you leave? So I'm not going to ask you to reveal any of your scores on that, but hopefully you at least did a mental scoring, if not something actually on paper, just to kind of see where it adds up. And remember, the lower the score, the better. The higher the score might be an area of interest or concern. Doesn't automatically mean you're addicted to love, but it is something to think about. So just like with everything else, you have to examine your beliefs. Beliefs are the foundation of everything. And so right after a breakup, your feelings of self-worth may be low. That's understandable because you just went through something that was relatively traumatic for you, something that at least was emotional for you. In some situations, not all breakups are like that, but if you went through a breakup and it created a deep emotional response from you, that's okay. That's to be expected. And you'll be in that place for a little while. I can't say how long because everything affects people differently. People grieve differently. So you might have to give yourself a little bit of grace, if you're feeling low and vulnerable and you're not feeling good about yourself, the way you look, or, your self-esteem is low, you're wondering if I am enough, why am I always in this position? If you do that for a little while, that's okay. But keep in mind that the attention and the validation need to come from you and not from family or friends or others. So you don't want to wallow in that. You don't want to stay there too long. Those are just patterns that if you notice, it happens repeatedly and it happens for long periods of time and it takes you to certain depths. Those are things you might want to pay attention to. So remember, a love addiction is not an official mental health diagnosis. Recovery, though, from a love addiction is learning to become addicted to wholeness instead of addicted to another person. Like I said earlier, many times we say things and we don't realize the magnitude of our words, but words have power. So even when we're talking about our spouse, our partner, the person that you hope to find one day, we'll refer to it sometimes as the better half. This is my better half. And while for the most part that's lighthearted and everybody knows how to take it, it could, along with other things, lead to low self-esteem, low self-worth, if you truly believe the other person is better. And then that low self-esteem might cause you to develop some of these behaviors and characteristics that we spoke about, which could lead to you becoming addicted to, I need the validation, I need the attention, the affection, etc. Okay, so let's look at ways, some practical steps, things that could potentially help. And again, if you think that you might be in this situation, you're not sure, you just want to run it by me, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to say your name. If you think people will recognize your voice, text, don't call. But if you choose to, the number to call is 412-213-8995 or 412-218-3888 if you wish to text. And I would be happy to walk you through your circumstance. And let's see if we can help you determine where you are. So one thing you need to do is recognize the pattern. Recovery has to begin with honesty. You cannot correct something that you will not confront. So you first need to be aware. And that's what relationship conversations with Dr. Linda Bing is all about. Raising your level of awareness around yourself, around others, around certain healthy conditions and unhealthy conditions, just to make sure that you are knowledgeable and you can always look for healthy relationships. You know the signs and the signals. So you definitely want to recognize patterns and you need to be honest with yourself. So again, here's some things to ask yourself. Do I panic when I'm alone? Do I ignore red flags because I don't want to lose someone? Do I constantly need reassurance? Do I become consumed by a relationship? I'm going to stop on that one for a minute. The others I had already alluded to earlier, but there are some people who, when they get into a relationship, they live and breathe that other person. It's not that the other person is saying, don't associate with your friends, don't hang out with your family. They're not saying that. But you just give so much time and attention to that individual and attending to their needs and making sure that they're happy that you don't have any time or energy or attention left for yourself, for your house, your apartment, your car, your family, your friends. So do you become totally consumed? And even if you don't think you're consumed, do your friends sometimes say it? Have you heard, girl, where you been lately? We never see you anymore. You don't come here or there. You don't hang out. You don't answer our calls. That might be a sign. Ask yourself, have I stayed with someone who repeatedly hurt me? And we're not just talking about violent physical domestic abuse, but is there someone who is always hurting your feelings? Someone who never considers what you might want. They just are all about themselves. Are they repeatedly hurting you? And do I confuse intensity with love? That's one that I talked about earlier as well, because just because someone is intense does not mean that they love you hard. You can't change a pattern you refuse to acknowledge. So answer those questions for yourself honestly. And if you have any doubt, ask a friend, ask someone who knows you really well. Who is your ride or die? Who is somebody that has known you for years and knows some of those deep darks that nobody else knows? They'll give you their honest opinion. So you might want to check with them. A second way to recover from a love addiction. Stop romanticizing the relationship. People with love addiction often remember only the highs. You remember the good things and you forget about the bad things. If you even think that maybe somehow it's possible that you might be addicted to love, then write down certain things, journal for yourself, write down the lies that the person has told. What are some untruths that you have discovered or they've revealed or you've caught them in? Write down the disrespect. When have they disrespected you? What did it look like? What did it feel like? Where were you? Who else was around? All of those things. Maybe the broken promises. When was the time they said they were going to do something and they didn't follow through? Write down manipulation. Anytime you felt like they manipulated you somehow, got you to do something against your will or tricked you or something along those lines. And the loneliness. Write down times when you have felt lonely, whether they were with you or not with you. When did you feel lonely and what else was going on? Because sometimes loneliness can set in at a certain time of day. Certain seasons tend to produce more loneliness than others. So there could be different factors impacting that. But when you're able to look back, if the list of these things is short, okay. But if the list is long or longer than you anticipated, then it could be that you are romanticizing the relationship. You're only focusing on the good times, not the bad times. And sometimes that happens. This is not love addiction, but sometimes it happens when people are with someone in relationship, they break up, go their separate ways, and then they come back together again. They come back together and they find that nothing's really changed, because all they were remembering were the good times. And so now we're back together and it's like, oh yeah, now I remember why I left in the first place. So a quick review from time to time over that list will help you keep things in perspective, because our brains tend to remember the chemistry while minimizing the pain. We remember the good times, not the bad. A third way to break this pattern and recover is learn how to be alone. This is often the hardest step. Many people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of what they'll feel when they're alone. Because if you ask people or you talk about it, people say, well, I don't mind being alone, or I'm not afraid to be alone, but how do you feel when you're alone? Do you feel lonely? Lonely and alone are two totally separate things. Do you feel lonely when you're alone? Maybe some people feel anxious when they're alone. They feel undesirable when they're alone. They feel unwanted or unchosen by friends when they're alone. They might be thinking, someone else got invited out and I'm sitting here by myself. So when was the last time you went out to dinner by yourself? Think about that. I got used to doing that because of the occupation that I'm in. Being a consultant, a coach, a trainer, I had to be on the road a lot, especially pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we were not doing things virtually on Teams or Zoom or anything else. When you were with a client or you were in a client organization, you had to physically go to where they were. So there are times when I'm flying all over the place, most of the time by myself, not as part of a team, or if there's someone I was going to be co-facilitating with, or we were working on a project together, chances are we met at the location. And many times people have different things going on. So you can't always count on connecting with someone for dinner. There were times back in the day when I did started my career and I did a lot of corporate work. Even I worked in corporations early on. As you would travel, it was just part of protocol that people would the people that you went to see at their corporation would oftentimes take you to dinner. They would treat you to dinner, pick you up at the airport, take you to get something to eat, etc. Now we've gotten to a place where nope, you get there on your own. You find your way to the hotel. You either go to the hotel, restaurant, or someplace close by to eat. But anyway, I say all that to say that based on my chosen occupation, much of the time I was traveling alone. So I would have to eat alone. And I got comfortable with it. Initially, the thought is, oh my gosh, and you start thinking about what people might think if they think you're alone. Are they going to think that I'm lonely? And are they going to think nobody wants me? Are they going to think that I'm easy to come over and talk to and that I want their company? What's going to happen? But I found that my company is really good. I don't mind being by myself. Sometimes I bring a book and read. Other times I just people watch. But take yourself out to dinner. And if dinner seems too scary at first, treat yourself to lunch first. So go out to lunch by yourself, go to dinner by yourself, try going to a movie or something. Again, imagine when you're in a city where you don't know anyone, you're just there to work. Sometimes it's overnight, sometimes it's weeks on end. There are assignments I've had, like the one that comes to mind initially for being kind of lengthy was going to the Philippines. I had to go to the Philippines. I was in the Philippines for 3 weeks. I was supposed to be there for 2. And I ended up having to stay an additional week because another situation popped up. So I didn't have a lot in common with the folks, not because they were Filipino. I didn't have a lot in common because many of the people that I was interacting with were a lot younger than I was, or because they were in their homes, they had to go home to children and husbands and prepare dinner. So for 3 weeks, what was I going to do? Just sit in my hotel room? No, I would eat by myself. I would catch a movie. I would go shopping. I would do different things. So learn to be comfortable by yourself and differentiate between being alone and being lonely, because they are not the same thing. You have to be confident. You have to have good confidence and good self-esteem to have healthy solitude, in order to go out and do things by yourself and not feel lonely. The better you are at that, the more confident and more self-esteem you're likely to have, because those things go together. All right, number 4. Identify what you're really craving. One way to recover from a love addiction and prevent it. These things I'm mentioning are not only recovery tips, they can be preventative. So identify what it is that you're really craving. Sometimes people think they're craving a person when what they're craving really is something else. Some of those things that I mentioned earlier, like validation, affection, etc. Sometimes it's touch, So the question becomes, what need am I asking this relationship to meet? And how can I get that need met outside of being in a relationship? Once again, if just the sense of someone's hands on your person is something, go get a massage, go to one of the stretching labs and let somebody stretch and work you out in that way. There are other ways to get the need met. You don't necessarily have to be in a relationship in order to get all of them met. Excitement. If you're one of those people who loves the chase and you're into relationships because of the chase and it's become an addiction, find other things that are exciting. Maybe you can go to an amusement park. Maybe you learn a new sport, you pick up a new hobby. There are other things that you can do. So again, what thoughts are running through your mind? Feel free to share them. 412-213-8995 or 412-218-3888. Number 5, build an identity outside of the relationship. We so often lose who we are. We become identified as belonging to someone else or as being part of that particular couple. It happens. Now, this is aside from a love addiction, but sometimes if I give you a different example, it helps you see what I'm talking about better. So sometimes as we're going through life, as a woman, you might become, so-and-so's wife or so-and-so's mother or, those kinds of things. What is your identity outside of whatever relationship you're in? So in a romantic relationship where we're talking about love addictions, healthy people have lives. You don't have to do everything together, always eat together, go places together. You don't have to be in the same room of the home together. Reconnect with certain things that were once fun or interesting or important to you. What hobbies did you have? Many times after a while, we spent so much time working, taking care of children, taking care of a home, that if someone asks what your hobbies are, you have to stop and think, hobbies? It's been so long since I've done something for myself, I don't even know. So reconnect with hobbies, do some volunteer work. Is there a cause that you have an affinity towards? Is there an organization that you want to support? Reconnect with friendships. Call up somebody you haven't spoken to in a long time and just reconnect. Maybe you want to go back to school, study something new. Maybe you like to travel. Of course, if you do, you can get travel tips right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. Francine Cameron and others, the fourth Saturday of every month, they will give you some good information, give you some good trips, places where you can go, tell you where it's safe to go by yourself. So get back into travel. There are all kinds of things, but you need to develop an identity outside of the relationship. Otherwise, you are more likely to lose yourself and become consumed, because now you're doing all of the things that he likes to do or that she likes to do, and you need to be doing things that are pleasing to you. So don't forget what those things are, because the healthier your identity, the less desperate your relationships become. When you don't know who you are, you don't know what you like and what you want, and you will settle for just about anything. Number 6, learn to delay impulsive decisions. You should never make a serious, significant, important decision when you're feeling very emotional. It doesn't matter whether the emotions are high or low. Sometimes love addiction thrives on urgency, and you feel like, oh, I have to call, I have to text, I have to know, I have to investigate. Just wait, practice waiting. Okay, don't call. Maybe you were talking to someone and they said, call you right back. I mean, that's a common phrase. Call you right back doesn't always mean they're going to call you right back. So maybe call you right back means I'll give you a call as soon as I'm free. I'll give you a call in an hour or so. I'll give you a call after I finish what I'm doing. It really just means I have to go, and I will return this call so we can regain this conversation, but you never know. So wait a minute, if they say I'll call you right back and it's been 15 minutes and they haven't called you back, unless you are in an emergency situation and you need their help right then, do or die kind of situation, then wait, give it a couple of hours. Maybe, you try calling them later, but don't get upset if you're not called right back. And sometimes you need to sleep on things. Something hits you and it just causes you to get in your feelings. You feel some kind of way about it. Okay. Sleep on it. Don't make a decision right then and there, because you're more likely to make a wrong decision. Maybe what you can do is call a trusted friend and run it by them, see what they have to say. Or one of the things I used to tell clients to do was to record it. Record yourself in your own phone so that you get it out, and you get it out with the feeling and the intensity and all of the emotions that are going on right now. And then wait a little bit and play it back for yourself. And if you are perfectly fine with the intended person hearing it as it was, cool. But if you listen to it yourself and you're like, ooh, that was a little harsh, or maybe I shouldn't have said it quite like that, or I didn't realize I was yelling, then those are good indications that, yes, you need to put this aside for a while and come back to it later. And even if you're talking about a positive emotion, it's the kind of thing like when you go to buy a car or a house, you never let them see how excited you are. You don't want to make decisions when you are feeling emotional, regardless of whether it's a positive or negative emotion. Number 7 on the list, and we're talking about ways that you can prevent or recover from love addiction. So if you're just joining me, I want you to know where you are in the conversation. And of course, at any point in time, give me a call at 412-213-8995 or text me 412-218-3888.
Looking for a cost of
Number 7, set boundaries. And what I'm going to do is put a pause and set boundaries, because I'm looking at the clock. It's time for my next break. So when we come back, I will give you some information on setting boundaries and a few other tips for how you can prevent or recover. All right. So we're talking about love addictions. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN, and we will be right back.
What's up, Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh's DSEN listeners? It's Monday. Let's start the week off right. We have that soulful music to help you. Yes, we have all the soulful sounds, and we hope that you're enjoying it. If so, send us a text at 412-218-3888 to let us know. We're wishing everyone a safe, productive, and fun week. And of course, keep our sounds on and let someone know about us. We are Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Oh, be so simple, but you rather make it hard. Loving you is like a battle, and we both end up with scars. Tell me.
All right, welcome back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. We are talking about ways to prevent or recover from a love addiction. And if you are not here at the top of the show, I did define love addiction. So I'm not going to take time to go back into it in any depth, but I will say that 40 to 60% of your propensity to become addicted to something is based on genetics. You also have environmental factors. And if you are in a situation where you feel like perhaps you are lost without the person, you feel as if you need them, you can't do without them, you become who they want you to be. There are a number of different ways to determine whether or not you're in a love addiction. I'm giving you some practical steps for things that can help you not only prevent, but possibly recover. And so I'm going to go through the rest of them quickly because it's time for me to get into what our second part of the show is about, which is 5 lies that ruin relationships. So we're up to number 7, which is set boundaries. Setting boundaries is not about the other person, it's about you. So you're not setting boundaries to punish them. You're setting boundaries to protect yourself. And that's an important thing to do. Another one is to heal the original wound. That would be number 8, heal the original wound. So this is where the real work begins. This one can be a tough one for some people. You have to ask yourself things like, when did I first begin believing whatever it is? Remember, I told you mindset, beliefs, that's everything. It's the foundation to everything. So when did I start believing this thing? Like maybe it's, when did I start believing I'm not enough? Or when did I start believing that I'll be abandoned? When did I start believing that if he left me or she left me, I couldn't function without them? When did I start believing I don't deserve healthy love? All of those are things that you need to think about and ask yourself those questions, because you have to be able to identify the original wound so that it can be healed. Number 9 would be to expand your sources of connection. One person should not be your be all and end all. One person should never have to meet every emotional need that you have. It's impossible. It puts too much responsibility and expectation on them, and it's a setup for disappointment for yourself because no one can do it all for you. I don't care how much you love them, how long you've been together, no one person can meet all of your needs. If you found that to be untrue, if you found that, yes, Dr. Linda, I got this one person and they do it all for me, then please, I want to hear from you. Give me a call. Number 10, learn what healthy love looks like. Well, hopefully you've been able to get some of that from Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. We talk about healthy love. That's what we're all about. What are healthy love situations? So many people have never really seen it. We think we have, but you haven't, because healthy love includes respect, consistency, honesty, peace, trust, accountability, and freedom to be yourself. Now, notice what's not on the list. I didn't say anything about drama. I didn't say anything about chaos. I didn't say anything about walking around on eggshells. If those 3 things, drama, chaos, and walking on eggshells, are part of your normal reality in your relationship, then your relationship is not as healthy as it could be or should be, and you need to look for ways to rectify that. Number 11, consider professional help, something that most people never want to hear. But one of the things that I hope that over time you have developed some trust in me and my abilities. I hope that over time, listening to the shows, that you have come to recognize that, yeah, I might know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I may have earned some of these credentials that I have. And if you're not familiar with them, Google me, look me up. But if you need a place to start, give me a call, send me an email. You can always reach me through the station. And of course, those numbers because we give them out and they're on the screen. But send me an email to Dr. Linda at turningpointlg.com. And that would just be Dr. Linda at turningpoint, L as in leadership, G as in group.com. And I can either attempt to assist you myself or steer you in the direction of someone who can. And it doesn't matter whether it's on this subject of love addiction or something else. This is all about helping people live healthy relationship lives. The last one, number 12. If you're a person of faith, this may not apply to everyone, but sometimes we expect another person to carry the weight that only God can carry. No human being was designed to be your identity, your savior, your security, your source of worth, your source of strength, none of that. When we ask someone to fill those roles, we often crush the relationship under expectations it was never meant to bear. And we ask them to play little g, God, in our lives. So make sure that you're not putting responsibilities on someone else or expectations on someone else that they were not put in your life to cover. Let God do godly work and let other people fill whatever role God has placed them in your life to fill. So recovery isn't about learning to love less. It's about learning to love from a place of security rather than desperation. When you're whole on your own, you're free to choose relationships because they enrich your life, not because they define who you are or your self-worth. So one of the things I'd love for you to do is list 5 things that you love about the person you're with, your partner, your spouse, whoever it might be. List 5 things that you love about that individual and ask yourself, would you rather be miserable with someone or peaceful by yourself? Just an exercise for you to go through, excuse me, to help you determine where you are with this healthy love thing. You may be nowhere near a love addiction, but that doesn't mean that your love is healthy. So think about it. Healthy love says, I want you. Love addiction says, I need you. The healthiest relationships are made of 2 whole people, not 2 people desperately trying to be completed or to complete someone else. And again, if you want more information on understanding love addictions and how to identify and overcome them, there are lots of books out there, but I'll tell you about one that I'm familiar with. It's called Addicted to Love, Understanding Dependencies of the Heart, Romance, Relationships, and Sex. And it's written by Dr. Stephen Arterburn. His last name is spelled Arterburn. In the book, Arterburn describes the many forms of love addiction. He describes who it afflicts and what you can do if you suspect that you, your spouse, or a friend may be suffering from it. So a love addiction may not be an official psychiatric diagnosis, but it definitely is not a healthy way to love. And if you feel you have a love addiction or maybe on the verge of developing one, you now know some things you can do to prevent and overcome it. And you are now better prepared to keep yourself from falling into that space. So definitely you want to carry that a little bit further. There's all kinds of good information out there. And that book is just one, as I said, that I'm familiar with. So it's a great place to start. All right. I told you that in the second part of the show, we were going to talk about 5 lies that sort of quietly destroy relationships. Any lie has the potential of destroying a relationship. But the most dangerous lies aren't the ones that your partner tells you. They're the ones you keep telling yourself. Many times we are sabotaging our own relationships and we don't even realize it. We're so focused on the other person and what the other person is doing. And you've got all these quiet little messages running inside your head, lies that are destroying your relationship. So as we get into this conversation, think about lies you've been telling yourself. They may be lies about your self-worth, lies about men, lies about women, how they behave, things they do. One of the things, go off on my one little tangent here, one of the things that I talk to people about a lot is, even like in my own social circles, I may every now and then catch one of my girlfriends begin a sentence with men are so, or men don't ever, or men, no. the men that you're familiar with, that may apply to them, but you can't take one brush and paint everybody with it. And sometimes the comeback is, well, it's not just the men that I know, it's the men that my girlfriends associate with as well. Yes, but if you and your girlfriends are similar and you have similar experiences, similar beliefs, similar expectations, then that energy that you're projecting is similar, which means that the men it's attracting is similar. And so whatever vibe you put out there, that's what you're going to get back. So you need a different vibe. You need to start believing something different, going someplace different, engaging with different people. So just be careful of grouping everyone together, whether it's men, women, or anything else. All right. And so sometimes those are the lies that hurt us the most. So if there's a lie that you have finally overcome, I would love to hear it, because you might be helping somebody else. You know, maybe you always grew up thinking that you were not pretty enough, or maybe you grew up thinking that, you know, no woman was going to want you because you were not into sports and you were overweight. Those are lies that you're telling yourself. So you need to overcome them. And if you have, we'd love to hear it. So lie number one, another person can make me happy. Wow. That's a false promise that we make to ourselves. Another person can make me happy. Where we were created to be in relationship, but that doesn't mean that we were created to make other people happy, or that someone was created to make us happy. So if I could just, you know, people translate that into, you know, if I could just find the right person, you know, whether it's a woman or a man, or if I could just find the right person, and then fill in the blanks. There's so many things that we think would be better about our lives if that mysterious person that we've been searching for would just show up and do what they're supposed to do. And that gets us into all kinds of trouble when we believe that, because we're looking for that perfect person. And I know people are saying, well, I don't expect them to be perfect. You expect them to fit your profile, to perfectly fit your profile. And when you set yourself up like that, chances are you're not going to find one person who fits everything that's on your list. So sometimes people spend decades looking for someone to fix an emptiness that only they can address. We may not admit it, but most of us look for a special someone that we think will make us happy. Or we're in a relationship with someone, maybe even a marriage with someone, and we feel unhappy and we want to blame that other person for our unhappiness. We often feel like if they would start doing or stop doing, when happiness is something that you have to do for yourself. When you're in an unsatisfying relationship, don't blame it on the other person. You know, yes, might be great if they changed. It might be great if they did something different. But what if they never do? And what is your responsibility? Because the only thing you can change really is, I won't even say yourself, because we have a hard time with that, but you can change your attitude, you can change your belief, you can change the way you respond to things. So, I mean, think about it. If they can make you unhappy, then the reverse would be true, that they can make you happy. And that's not the case. So happiness is a choice. That's something that, again, in sessions with people, it's something that I find I've had to teach people. We need to unlearn where we think happiness comes from and learn where it really comes from. Many times this lie comes from the fact that there are fairy tales out there. You know, think about Snow White and Cinderella, and you know, you find that prince, you find that special someone. There are movies where love seems to solve every problem. You know, I'm not putting down Hallmark movies. Every now and then I'm in the mood for one, but it's every then more so than every now. But you ever notice how when you watch a Hallmark movie, people meet and 2 weeks later they are madly in love and ready to be married? That's not reality. That's not reality. And we know that logically, but it still gets embedded in your psyche. And anything that gets into your subconscious mind influences your behavior. And that's why you have to be careful of music you listen to, books you read, movies you watch, all of those things. It's not just the kids that have to be careful. It's grown folks too, because anything that gets in your psyche is going to come out in one way, shape, or form. So be careful of the fairy tales. Be careful of things that you see on social media. Most people don't go around posting the negatives. They post the wins, the achievements, the highs, the positives. And we get hooked into believing, wow, their life is so good, I want what they have. You're not seeing reality. So many times, we go through life feeling as if we're missing out on something and we're not. So I want to tell you about another book in 1999. So it goes back, but the information in it is still good. Rick Foster and Greg Hicks wrote a book called How to Choose to Be Happy. The 9 choices of extremely happy people, their secrets, their stories. Like I said, it's an older book, but the principles in the book are still sound. And basically what Foster and Hicks do is they discuss 9 choices that people make throughout their lives, choices that determine their behavior in a wide range of circumstances. It helps make the point that we control our happiness, not other people. It's about mindset. It's about attitude. 2 people can be in the exact same situation and experience it differently based on their attitude, their mindset. So many times you cannot depend on, not many times, you cannot depend on somebody else for your happiness. And you can't always depend on circumstances changing, but you can change how you respond to those circumstances. So when they talk about it, they define happiness as, this long-lasting feeling of contentment and capability and centeredness. They say it's knowing your internal self and responding to your real needs rather than the demands of others. And it's a deep sense of engagement, living in the moment and enjoying all that life has to offer. No one else can do that for you. No one else can do that for you. So what happens when you believe the lie? Well, when you believe the lie that you're waiting for somebody else to come along and then you'll have a happy life, you become disappointed every time your partner acts human. They are human. As humans, we make mistakes. We all do. So maybe they've had a bad day, but you can't expect them to consistently behave in a certain way because different factors come into play. And so maybe instead of asking them, or instead of asking yourself, what do I need? Ask, why am I not fixing this thing? It's not a matter of what I need for them to do, but what can I do to change my situation? The damage that lie causes, one thing is resentment. When you are expecting someone else to make you happy and it doesn't happen, you can become bitter and resentful for something that was not in their control, something that they were not purposed and created to do, something that you should be doing for yourself. Another area of damage is emotional dependence. So in other words, relying on someone else as your primary source or your only source of happiness, self-worth, and emotional stability. When you do that, when you are emotionally dependent, your mood and your confidence rise and fall. They rise and fall based entirely on the actions and the approval or the presence of that other person. Another way that it's damaging, unrealistic expectations. I've been talking about that all along. Do you want more than is realistically possible for them to give? Disappointment, control, guilt. All of those things happen as a result of lie number 1. So the antidote to that is to believe I am responsible for my own happiness, because healthy partners add happiness. They don't manufacture it. They may do things that bring you joy, but they are not the manufacturer, the sole source, the responsible party for your joy. Can another person really give you self-worth? That's something you got to get for yourself. Happiness is something you have to get for yourself. All right, so lie number 2. If my partner would change, we'd finally be happy, healthy, in a good place. This one is huge because people become relationship detectives. They can identify every flaw. Many times, if you're in a relationship or your relationship happens to be going through a space right now where you're not really happy with one another and you're not really engaging in healthy relationship behavior on a regular basis, you can identify every little flaw in that individual. How they comb their hair, how they chew their food, how they get in the bed, how they get out of the bed, the noises they make getting up off the sofa. I mean, it can get to be so small and so minute. Forget about the big things. We can tell you every little thing. Even in a good, healthy relationship, I bet anybody listening to this right now, that you can probably talk about all the little flaws, all the little annoyances in your partner. Now, it doesn't mean that your relationship is unhealthy, doesn't mean that you're living a lie. It's just that we become relationship detectives. We can pick out all of that stuff. And you know that what you concentrate on grows. We spend our time focused on the 10% that they do wrong and ignore the 90% that's good about them, the 90% that drew us to them in the first place. And when we do that, when we focus on the 10%, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it squeezes out the 90%. So instead of looking for their flaws, why don't we look for the things that they do well? You know, I said in the last segment, make a list of 5 things that you love about that person. Why do you love them? Why are you with them? Not things that they do, but things about who they are, their personality, their character, etc. So we need to stop looking. We need to stop looking for the bad things, the hard things. I remember many, many years ago hearing a pastor say this statement that I'm about to make, and it left an impression on me, so much so that I would often incorporate it into counseling and coaching that I would do because I truly believe it. What he said, and again, this is faith-based, but he said, conflict in a marriage or a relationship, conflict in a marriage is God's way of asking you to change. We get so focused on what the other person needs to do or not do, we don't think about what is it that I need to do. And like I said, it's mindset. It starts with mindset, and it's not about someone else making you happy. The only thing you can really change is your mind. So if you're not happy in a situation, instead of thinking about what they are doing or not doing, think about how you might look at it differently, how you might get a lesson from it, turn it into something good. Sometimes we get into relationships and we want to bounce because we're like, I know that this is not what I was intended to be. You know, this is not the future that I had in mind. This is not okay, but you're in it. So how do you turn it and shape it and twist it to make it a good thing? It's easy to love someone who's easy. It's easy to love someone who gives you everything you want, focuses solely on you, gives you the attention, all those lists of things we talked about with the love addiction, the things that you might be craving. They do everything for you, make you so happy. It's easy to love that person. But real love, unconditional love, agape love, the kind of love we're called on in marriage, you're paired with someone who's going to rub against you. They're going to rub, but you know that friction creates pearls. Sand inside of an oyster. Think about it like that. It's the grit, the rubbing of the sand against the oyster that causes the oyster to emit certain fluids and creates that hard shell around it that becomes the pearl. The oyster becomes the pearl because of the friction, because of the conflict, if you will. Same thing happens with people. People are placed in our lives so that we learn how to change our minds, how to have positive attitudes, how to behave differently, how to put a spin on it, how to be grateful. All of that conflict is for a reason, but it's about you. It's not about them changing to make your life easier. So instead of looking for the flaws, how do you use the flaws? Become an oyster. How do I use this sand that's in my life to turn me into a pearl? That's the way we ought to be thinking about this. You know, Maya Angelou said it like this. She said, what you're supposed to do when you don't like a thing is change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So where does it begin? Sometimes in childhood. Sometimes your concerns are legitimate, but you can't make them happen. You know, you can't just create the life that you want someone else to provide for you. You can just be grateful for what you have and look for ways perhaps to make things better, but be content while you're in it until the change comes. So this causes damage too. This lie number 2. So let's talk about some of the damage that lie number 2 causes. It creates bitterness in people. It causes us to criticize people. It creates contempt. You know, sometimes people in close relationship, when the relationship is not healthy and there's all that sand creating the friction, people who have committed in front of witnesses to love, cherish, and obey now have deep-seated contempt for that other person. It can create hopelessness. It can create distance. You could be seated in the same room and be distant from someone if there's no connection between the two of you. Eventually, you become roommates who are keeping score. There's a difference. Just because you're living in the same house doesn't mean you're living as a healthy couple. You could be living like roommates where everything is separate. I have mine, you have yours. I do my thing, you do your thing, and never the two shall meet. So you didn't sign up for a roommate. You signed up for a life partner. So what are you going to do to make that a reality? It's a huge difference. I need the relationship to improve, and I need you to become a different person. Two different things. If you need the relationship to improve, you're going to look for things that you could do to help that along the way. But if you feel like you need for that other person to become different and to make a change, you will sit back, do nothing, wait for them, and be disappointed because it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So ask yourself, what am I contributing, whether it's positive or negative? What am I contributing to this situation? What can I own? What can I improve? And if both people in the relationship were to ask those questions, there probably wouldn't be a problem because each one would be doing their part to help make things better. So here's some questions. We're about to take a break. We're about 5 minutes out from the break, but there are some questions I want you to think about. I want you to think about, when is the last time you tried to fix someone? Now, in our minds, we're going to instantly say, well, I know better than that. I've never tried to fix someone, but think about your behavior. Did you make some sort of suggestion to them about how they could or should do something differently? That might have been an attempt to fix. Sometimes we do it almost in a manipulative kind of way. You tell somebody, well, you really should be eating a salad instead of eating that steak, because salads give you so much, nutrition and energy and whatever it is that you want to say, when really you're trying to fix them. You're trying to get them to drop a few pounds, but you're just going about it, going around the block and through the back door. You're not coming out and saying it because that might be hurtful. But what you're doing is manipulation. And what you're doing is trying to fix someone. So many times we do drop these little hints, leave little secrets, buy them gifts that, buying somebody a Fitbit as a gift is not a real gift. It's a hint, okay? It's almost an out and out message. Forget about the hint. But we do those things not because, or I should say not only because yes, you might genuinely be concerned about their health, but that's not the only reason. We are trying to fix them. We're trying to make them someone that they are not. So when is the last time you tried to fix someone? Question number 2. Got 3 of them for you before we break. Question number 2. Have you ever spent more time trying to fix someone else than improving yourself? One of the things that I think is interesting, it used to come up as a joke a lot years ago, but you would have these jokes about, husbands who wanted their wives to lose weight, particularly after they had babies and there was the baby fat and that kind of thing. And he's looking over a beer belly trying to get her to do some exercise. It's like, what? What is wrong with this picture? So oftentimes we're so focused. Remember I said we become these relationship detectives looking for all of the flaws. We're trying to get somebody else to fix their flaw, but we're not noticing the flaws ourselves. Biblically, we talk about taking the log out of your own eye, not the splinter out of someone else's, So it's like their little flaw is irritating you and you're overlooking it. You may not be in the best shape or the best health, but you're trying to quietly, silently encourage someone else to do that. And it's not just a weight thing or a health thing. It can happen in a number of different areas. Instead of spending time focused on what they can or should do to improve themselves or to make the relationship better, look in the mirror. Remember the old adage about when you point at someone, there's one finger pointing at them, but 3 pointing back at you? Take a look at least one of those 3 fingers. And then the last one before the break. When was the last time you apologized without adding the word but? When's the last time you said, I'm sorry, and that was the end of it? Or I'm sorry for what I did, and that's the end of it, as opposed to, well, I'm sorry, but, If you hadn't have done this, I wouldn't have done that. The but negates everything that was in front of it. That's not a real sincere apology because you're still finding some blame with the other person. So you can't apologize and then give your explanation after it. I'm sorry, but is not a real apology. When was the last time you apologized without adding the word but? So just think about these things, hopefully over the break, but you can, not because I'm asking you to call in and share, though you're perfectly welcome to do so, but take time, do that. And if you're not going to do it over the break, then maybe write them down and do it at another point in time. It might even be, depending on the kind of relationship you have with your partner, it might be something that you ask them to do as well. You write down your answers to those three, get them to write down the answers to those three. You don't have to share or exchange. It just gets you both on the same page, thinking about relationships differently. So when is the last time you tried to fix someone? Have you ever spent more time trying to fix someone else than improving yourself? And when was the last time you apologized without adding the word but? Just some things to think about before we return. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. Please come back after the break. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN.
Party. Yes, each Saturday we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. All the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
But I guess all I could say is I'm addicted to loving you.
Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and you're listening to Pittsburgh's DSEN. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're just joining us, let me just give you a quick little rundown. We spent the first hour talking about love addictions. I gave information about how it's defined, some of the causes, how you recover and prevent love addictions. And now in this hour, and we're into our final segment of the show, we're talking about 5 lies that ruin relationships. Now, any lie has the potential to ruin a relationship, but these are not lies that are told to you. These are lies that you have a tendency to tell yourself. So I asked some questions right before the break, and hopefully you will think about those. Lie number 1 had to do with another person can make you happy. Lie number 2, if my partner would change, we would finally be, and you can fill in the blank, happy, more successful, whatever the case might be. We're ready for lie number 3. We're going to do 3, 4, and 5 before the end of the show. Thank you for hanging in with me. I've got a few technical difficulties over here, but nothing ain't going to stop us from bringing you Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. So, lie number 3, grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. That's a big one that we often tell ourselves just because we are unhappy where we are and we're looking for a way out. Sometimes we're thinking about, if I were with someone else, I would not have to put up with this stuff. And that could be true. But there would be some stuff that you'd have to put up with. There always is. There's going to be something. And remember that somebody's putting up with your stuff too. So everyone eventually, I think, has a thought around, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people have that thought around life would be better, or I would be happier, maybe more successful, maybe whatever the case might be, if I was with someone else. It's not a pervasive thing, but for many people in the heat of an argument or when they're really upset or disappointed with that special someone, that thought often pops into mind, something that people have a tendency to think about. But the danger of making comparisons becomes evident when you make a statement like that. Why are you even thinking about other grass? Stay in your own backyard, because as I said earlier, sometimes it comes from the movies, things we see on social media, songs, all of that is fantasy. Don't believe the hype. But we hear about these things and we wonder, why can't I have that too? Or what would I have to do in order to get that? And we often think that it's by being with someone else, we might be able to have those things. So don't get caught up in what you see in the reels and the stories on IG and FB. This is not real. When you compare your everyday to someone else's, you start to believe lie number 3. That's where it gets started. And so what people forget is that every relationship is going to have certain things like laundry, bills, arguments, bad moods, health problems, family issues, disappointment, and the list goes on and on and on. Every single relationship. Now, the bills may be different bills. The arguments may be about a different subject, but they're all going to be there. So rather than think about or fantasize about what it would be like if you could just get rid of this particular person, if they were not in your life, if you were single again, all of the things on that list are still going to be there regardless. So stop fantasizing about the grass on the other side. It often it has this magical feel, like if I could only, but that's just in your fantasy. That's just in your fantasy. There's still going to be a mortgage. There's going to be teenagers, dirty dishes, whatever the case might be. So what's the damage associated with lie number 3? Emotional affairs. Sometimes that's where emotional affairs come from. So you might not ever actually get with that person, but because the image that they portray, because what you see in them looks so good and so tempting to you, that you might develop a desire for them. You might never act on it, but even if your thoughts and your attention is being devoted in an intimate way towards someone else, that's an emotional affair. And sometimes emotional affairs, if it's someone that's within your reach, an emotional affair can become an actual physical, intimate affair. So stay away from them. For some people, it turns to pornography. Depending on what it is that you think would be greener on the other side, people have a tendency to, okay, maybe they're feeling like, I don't want to get trapped in any kind of an affair, so let me look at people who are outside of my reach. And now you might get addicted to pornography. And again, a lot of the stuff that's happening on those porn flicks, not that I watch them, but I can imagine. Most of that stuff's not going to happen back in your house. So don't even feel that with your head. Don't even think about all of those fantasies. It ain't going to happen. And you probably ain't putting it down like the person in that video either. So let's just do away with that one. Discontent. The more you look at and make comparisons to something that is great, it's like, okay, somebody's driving. You may have just bought a new car. Your new car might be a Honda Accord, and you might love it. Your Honda has all of the features you were looking for the right price. But if you keep looking at the Mercedes and the BMW and whatever else that your friends are out there driving, you may start to become discontented. Now your Honda, which was good enough for you when you bought it, is no longer good to you anymore, because now you're seeing some of the other things that are out there and you're allowing yourself to fantasize about the green grass associated with that Mercedes or that BMW, whatever it might be. Constant comparisons. Once you start to feel discontent, you're always going to be comparing, and you will never appreciate what you have. Gratitude is necessary to get you to the next level. You can't just bemoan and belittle the things that you have. Be grateful for the little so that you can get much. So what's the antidote for that? Water your own lawn. Seriously, take care of the things that are going on in your life? Are you making sure that everyone's needs are met? Some of the desires are being met? Are you providing the comfort, the peace, the support that your partner needs? Are you there for your children? What are you doing in your own home? Because if you could make your own situation better, sometimes that's contagious. Your partner might see that you are really putting forth effort, which causes them to think about what they might be able to do differently. And when you're both putting forth the effort, things change. So instead of focusing on what you don't have, start building from what you do have. Another thing is similar. It's like to invest where you are. Put your efforts where you are. And remember that romance grows where attention goes. Romance grows where attention goes. If you want more romance, whatever that means to you from your partner, make sure you are giving your partner the appropriate attention. And that's where it's important to keep those love languages in mind. Don't just love them the way they want to be loved. I mean, the way you want to love them the way they want to be loved. And so if you know that there's a certain thing that speaks to them, like maybe it's words of affirmation, then provide those words of affirmation. It costs you nothing, but it might get you everything. So make sure that you are giving the proper attention, which includes affection, romance, nurturing, helping with bills, laundry, kids, etc. Give the proper attention to your partner, your spouse, because romance grows where attention goes. So have you ever left one relationship only to discover the next one had the same problems? You have to think about it. If you keep going from relationship to relationship and the problems are the same or similar, the common denominator is YOU. Look at yourself and what can you do differently? All right, you ready for lie number 4? Lie number 4, this is one of my favorites. Lie number 4 says that sex will fix the relationship. So many times couples quietly believe this, and what gets portrayed in the media, pornography, movies, messages that equate sex with intimacy. People think that the way to have a better relationship is to do it through sex. And while sex will make you feel good, and it might take your mind off of those things for a moment, when the feel good is over, the problems are still there. So sex does not solve the problems. Some people take it a step further and they even think that having a baby, if we had another child, it would help make the relationship better. I will never understand that one. I will not understand, because of course with more children comes more responsibility, less time, comes more expenses, comes more parent teacher conferences and sporting events, and it's just more. So no, that will not happen. And you have to keep in mind that if you're having more sex to fix the problem, then you may end up with more babies, and it's not going to fix the problem. So just because it feels good doesn't mean that everything is all good. Sex is physical and intimacy is emotional. Those are two totally different things. It's possible to have a great sex life, but with very little real intimacy in the relationship. Maybe outside of sex, what do we have to talk about? What do we have in common? Why are we even together? Do we enjoy one another's company? Do I even know you? What are some of your favorites? What are the things you enjoy? Where did you grow up? Many times we'll have great sex with someone, but very little intimacy, because intimacy is those other things that I mentioned, and it takes talking and time and all kinds of things to build intimacy. Intimacy is emotional closeness. It's a deep personal connection. It's when you trust one another, when you're vulnerable in front of one another, and it goes way beyond the physical and the sexual contact to include how well people know one another. Do these people really understand each other? It's important because it helps build trust and understanding. You cannot sustain a relationship without intimacy. It can be sustained without sex. You may not believe that. It can be sustained without sex, but it cannot be sustained without intimacy. Trust is relational. Intimacy is intentional. Those are different things. You can have incredible sex, like I said, and terrible communication. You can have frequent sex and still feel lonely. Sometimes sex will even get in the way of intimacy because people are they use it to avoid conflict. Rather than talk about it, they just go have some good mad sex, but the problem is still there. Sometimes people do use sex as a way to reduce anxiety or to hold on to a person to keep them in the relationship. And it can damage it. You may not think sex can be damaging, but here's some ways that sex can possibly damage the relationship. People confuse desire with commitment. Just because somebody wants you doesn't mean they're committed to you. And I'm sure people have learned that by the one who got away. You are the one who is no longer in your life. Many times there was the intensity there. There was the physical intimacy that was there, but there was not the commitment. They were there for the good sex, and that's all that they were there for. So that can be very damaging when you start to think about it in that way. Another way that sex can possibly damage the relationship is it becomes transactional, meaning that it's used almost as a bargaining tool rather than a free expression of how you feel about someone. You might have sex with someone just to make them happy, just to shut them up, whatever the case might be. It can build resentment. One partner can feel used and the other one might feel rejected. So what do we do about it? How do you fix this whole idea of the sex being the antidote to the bad relationship? You create emotional safety first. You have to exist in an environment where you feel emotionally safe with that person, where you feel like I can tell you how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and you're not going to judge me. There's not going to be any punishment or retribution. You're not going to criticize me. It has to feel emotionally safe. Sometimes couples feel like, they talk to friends or family members because they feel like I can't share that. Well, if this is your spouse, the person that you have committed to do life with, you should be able to share how you're feeling, whether the feelings are good, bad, or indifferent. You should be able to share that with your spouse. So sometimes we exist in environments where we don't feel emotionally safe. And if you don't feel emotionally safe, you won't allow yourself to be vulnerable. When you're not vulnerable, nobody gets to see who you really are because there's this wall up. You send out your representative. They see the representative and they know the representative really well, but they may not really get to see all of the different pieces that make you, you. So you have to be very careful about creating an emotionally safe environment before you create physical intimacy. And lots of times, as I mentioned, we want to skip over that and we want to go straight to the physical, thinking that it's going to somehow help. It helps for the moment, but not for the long term. So how do you create emotional safety? Some of it I already shared, but emotional safety in a relationship, here it goes again. Emotional safety in a relationship is something that comes with time. It's something that comes with intentionality. You create it by expressing how you feel, by listening without judging, by learning to trust, by sharing your feelings. Sometimes you have to do some active listening. Sometimes you have to validate. Even if you disagree with how someone is feeling, first validate. I hear what you're saying. I hear you saying that we don't spend enough time together. Don't do the but. Just I hear you saying we don't spend enough time together. Tell me what I can do to make that better. Those are the kinds of things that build the emotional intimacy. And once the emotional intimacy is there, it becomes easier to then enjoy the physical intimacy. Sex is something that should be enjoyed not just in the physical space, but in the emotional space. And for many people, many times it's women, but for many people, we have to be emotionally in a good spot before we want to be physically involved. You've probably heard this before, but making love to a woman is not something that just happens in the bedroom. Making love to a woman is something that happens all day long. If you haven't done the things that she required throughout the day, then when nighttime falls, she's not feeling it because it's not just a physical thing. It's an emotional thing. It's something that happens all day long. Now, that doesn't mean that she won't engage in sex. It doesn't mean that she won't enjoy the physical aspect of it. But for many women, it has to be something that happens all day long. All right, last but not least is lie number 5. Lie number 5 is that real love should be easy. Man, that's a big myth. This is probably the biggest lie of modern relationships. And again, it comes from Disney, Hollywood, social media, soulmate culture. You know, there are people who actually believe that we have one soulmate and you find that one person, they're your real true love and life will be easy. Sorry to break it to you, but that's not the way it is. Real love doesn't mean that things will be easy. I already gave you the example of what it means to really have unconditional agape love for someone. It means that it won't be easy. It's just the opposite. It means that they are going to do some things that get on your last nerve, but how are you going to respond to those things? And every marriage eventually enters seasons of stress, of illness, financial instability, grief, parenting challenges, career changes, menopause, retirement. It's called life. It's called life. And so compatibility might minimize the effort. You know, when you're yeah, it might minimize the effort. When you're compatible with someone, you may not have to work as hard, but trust me, there's always going to be some work. So it doesn't mean that it should be easy. Don't get caught up in that trap. Don't feel that this is not the person for me, because if it was, life would not be so hard. Now, let me break that down a little bit, because having said that, there are some things that could be indicators that this is not the person for me. And that's why it's so important to do the work up front. You know, I like for people to do premarital counseling. I may have shared that with you before, because that's one way that you can start to really get to know who someone is. It's not just hanging out and having a good time, enjoying one another's company, having similar hobbies, likes and dislikes. It's going through the hard questions and giving the answers to those hard questions. And that's one of the things that a premarital counselor would do with you. It's not somebody who's going to give you permission whether or not you should get married. No, nobody can do that for you. It's not that they're going to judge or label. They are going to pull you out of the euphoria of being in this wonderful relationship and cause you to think about some of the hard things. Even if you don't see eye to eye, you at least know that this is an area where there's some potential friction, and we need to come up with a plan. We need to understand what we would do in this particular situation. I need to know if this is someone that I can do life with when we no longer look like this, we no longer have the same physical stamina, when we're not able to enjoy the foods together that we like, when the physical hobbies have to change, all of that. That will get you thinking along those lines. So healthy couples can disagree, but healthy couples also know how to repair. So the fact that you guys are not getting along does not necessarily mean that you don't belong together. They might just be your sand to turn you into a pearl, or vice versa. But what it means is we now need to work together as one, as a team, and figure our way out of this mess. How do we get to the happiness? Whatever it was that caused you to fall so deeply in love that you wanted to do life with this person, how do we get back to that? That's what it's really about. Yeah, challenges are going to come, but how do we get back to where we used to be? So love is less about finding the right person and more about becoming the right partner. Let me say that one again. That was pretty good. Even if you don't appreciate that one, I appreciate that one. Love is less about finding the right person and more about becoming the right partner. Who does my partner need me to be? And yes, maybe there are certain habits or hobbies that I have or had that I might need to tone down a little bit, or change, or introduce to them and bring them into it, whatever. But how do I become the best partner so that they don't tell themselves some of these other lies, so that they don't become someone who's looking at the grass on the other side of the fence? So the damage is that many times when people are not in this stage of mature love, as I'll call it, one person may leave too soon. You might have left a relationship too soon. If you had changed your mindset, done a little bit of the work, put forth a different kind of effort, got in touch more with what that person wanted and needed from you, more expressive about what you wanted and needed from them. When those things don't happen, many times people leave way too soon. And it is just as important to learn what they need as it is to tell them what you need. You cannot, old folk used to say, a closed mouth won't get fed. You cannot expect your partner to be helpful and assist in certain areas if you don't let them know that that's an area of need or interest to you. So definitely the damage is that people leave too soon. Another damaging thing is that they think that the conflict means failure. No, it's just conflict. And with the right partner and the right techniques and the right level of emotional intimacy, etc., you can get past that. It's a speed bump. You'll get over it. So again, healthy couples disagree, but they also know how to repair. And it's important that you do the repair work, and don't just wait until the conflict comes up. There's maintenance. Again, anything that's important to you. Think about your home, your car, your motorcycle, your lawnmower, whatever it is. We're always we're always in this place where we can do maintenance work. If you take care of it along the way, doesn't mean that there won't be a problem, but the problem is less severe. It's minimized. So we have to do the maintenance work. So think about what season nearly broke your relationship. Was it an illness? Was it finance? Was it apathy and no motivation? What was it? What season nearly broke your relationship? And more important, what helped you get through that season? You need to remember those things because you may have to come back to them again. Seasons change. Think about it. In your lifetime, you're going to go through a number of different winters. Same thing happens in relationships and in marriages. If you're with someone long enough, hardships are going to come. It's like the 4 seasons, they cycle. And I know many times you'll hear people talk about if you're not in a storm, you're probably headed for one or just coming out of one. It may not be that severe in your relationship. You may have more peace, more calm in your relationship, but trust and believe that there will be trials and tribulations in it. And so remembering who you are, why you wanted that person in your life, what you need to do to become a good partner for them, and what helped you in the past, those are things that will serve you well in the present and in the future. So as we get ready to close, here's a challenge for you. Before you point to your partner tonight, something may come up. Before you point to them, ask yourself 3 questions. Ask yourself, what lie have I been believing, whether it was about you or about them? What lie have I been believing? And it may not be one of the 5. I think most couples will experience at least one of the 5 lies that I shared with you tonight. But even as you're doing this exercise, if you find that a lie that you have been believing may not be on this list, but okay, what lie have I been believing? Question number 2, how has that lie shaped the way I love? Lies, not just lies, beliefs shape behaviors. And so many times our behavior can be traced back to a certain lie or your partner's behavior. Maybe they're behaving a certain way because of a lie that they're believing. Maybe it's the lie that's causing them to act in a certain way, creating this behavioral cyclone as opposed to who they are. That may not be who they are. That's just the lie that they're believing. So we have to ask ourselves, what lie have I been believing? How has that lie shaped the way I love? And what truth do I need to replace the lie with? That's an important one. You don't just remove something, you have to put something else in its place. Think about a tooth, and again, I know sometimes these analogies I give you are a little out there, but they work. When you have a tooth pulled, most often your dentist will replace that tooth with, they'll cap a tooth, they'll put an implant in, they'll do something because you have to protect that area. And you don't want the other teeth to kind of grow in and crowd over that area. You don't want decay or gum disease to build up. So, okay, what does that have to do with relationships, Doc? The point is, when you remove something, you need to replace it with something else. So, what lie have I been believing? How has that lie shaped the way I love? What truth do I need to replace it with? Because healthy relationships don't happen because two perfect people find each other. They happen because two imperfect people become courageous enough to exchange lies for truth, blame for responsibility, and fear for love. That will do it for this particular edition of Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. Before I leave, you know, I always need to leave you with the messages about what is happening at Pittsburgh's DSEN in the days to come. So here's some information for you. Let me see if I can find the promo information that I know the folks back at the station sent over to me. All right, so Soul Take tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. How can I forget that? Every Tuesday night, Soul Take. The fellas are going to be talking about the Steelers quarterback battle at training camp. They'll be talking about Will Howard versus Drew. This is not coming across right. They'll look at all the Pirates. Forgive me, guys. WNBA big trade of Kelsey Plum, thoughts on WNBA playoff races and more. And then, of course, after my show tonight, as always, you can listen to the best of soulful music from 10 until midnight. So again, I thank you for hanging in there with me tonight and every Monday night. Some of you try not to ever miss it, and I appreciate you. And if this was your first time, please don't let it be your last. Go back and listen to some of the recordings. You can find them on YouTube at the Pittsburgh DSEN station. Whatever you do, make sure that you keep learning, keep loving. One love. Good night.
You've been listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Continue to listen to Pittsburgh's DSEN. We're on 24/7. See our radio schedule for programming details, and please remember to subscribe to receive updated information.